Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. This week we are taking a look at Chris's choice, but really my choice of Battle Royale. Last week,
taking credit for my choice. Jesus.
For those who don't know, the way this podcast normally works is we review a movie from our sort of youth, a movie that we have nostalgia for, a movie we just remember and want to kind of rewatch and have a look at with a more critical adult eye. And just see if they hold up. Chris and me, generally speaking, swap who chooses each film. And a couple of weeks ago, I said that I thought Chris might choose something surprising for his next film. Chris is very, I mean, let's be honest, quite brilliant response. He didn't accidentally. I cocked up and I left the name of this film in a shared document I have with Chris. That's about the podcast schedule, and Chris had worked out I was going to choose it this week. So the truest and most surprising thing for Chris to do was to choose a film I was pretty sure he'd never seen, and not only that, but one I was about to choose the week after. So this is Chris's choice, but this is a film I was going to choose for the next episode. Yeah, get that explanation out of the way nice and early. I was going to ask what your history with the film is, Chris, but I suppose your history with the film is me choosing it and you watching it.
My history with the film is that whenever anyone brings up Hunger Games, usually someone goes, yeah, but that's basically Battle Royale. That's my history with this film.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting that, isn't it? I do think there'll be some discussion today, I'm sure, about the comparisons, but I remember when... So I sort of told this last week on the podcast, but just to give some context, my history of the film is quite simply that I saw it probably too young. I'd have been about, I think I worked out that I'd have been like 13 or 14, which is far too young to see this film, in my opinion. And it was one of those things where someone at school had gotten hold of a copy, and they watched it the once they liked it, and then they brought it in, handed it to someone else, who then brought it back in and handed it to someone else, and eventually it got to me. And then it just kept going around the school. I'm pretty sure hundreds of kids watched this one copy. I might reach out to the original owner to see if he ever even got it back, because I'm curious. Did it ever return to the original owner, or does it just shared into oblivion?
Do you think definitely? Because I've obviously, this is like the second or third time I've heard this, and like. Do you really think 100? I'm not. You were there. Like, I'm just asking the question. I'm being the voice of the listener here. Do you really think hundreds of people saw it from that copy? There
were about 1,000 kids in the school. It was definitely double digits without question. I personally saw at least I think nearly 20, which is the kids in my immediate form. But then I know people outside of my form that also saw that copy. So if it went through other forms the way it went through mine, I mean, this is over months we're talking. We're not talking like, over a week. This is just carried on, and it would a different kid seem to come into school every so often and say, like, oh, I've seen it. Talk about it some more. And to be fair, I did feel bad for the kids who saw it later. Because at a certain point, I think we got bored of talking about it. So they'd come in like, I've finally seen it. We'd be like, cool. Welcome to 3 months ago. Let's talk about Pokemon. So it definitely double digits, for sure. I saw it go to, I think, in the 20s that I could account for. Maybe hundreds is an exaggeration, but it's somewhere in that, like, it's somewhere between that mark of like sort of 20 kids to like, potentially triple digits, because again, it really did go around the school. Anyway, and it was one of those films that one of the films I blame for sort of ruining my horror taste early on, because then everything else seemed kind of tame in comparison. You watch a movie like this, and it comes out the same year as Final Destination. Now, I didn't see Final Destination the year it came out, but I didn't see this the year it came out either. I don't know 100% which one I saw first, but I suspect this, because I very distinctly remember feeling Final Destination was a bit tame as a kid. And I think it's understandable that I got to that conclusion having seen this movie. So that's kind of my history with it. I'm curious, because it's one I've not come back to a lot, I'll be honest. So I'm very curious to get your thoughts.
Obviously we tend to start with whether we would recommend it. I'd absolutely recommend it. I think it's a phenomenal film. I think I think all the... And, as we're discussed, I think there are things that you can critique on the film, but it kind of feels like with all of them, I feel like it's exactly the film the filmmakers wanted it to be. And,
Yes.
if you go, oh, well, some of the themes could be made, could do more with some of the themes. You go, well, the filmmakers didn't want to. There's too many characters. So, at least at the beginning, it takes a while to really work out who we're following here. And maybe, if the class wasn't 30, but the class was 15, you'd be able to do more character stuff. Again, doesn't feel like the film... It feels like the film did as much character stuff as it wants you to do. It feels like the film is a violent comic book, and I mean graphic novel type of film, and it's got as much character stuff as it needs to, and you can sit and digest and explore the themes and the characters after the fact if you want, or you can enjoy it as a teenager passing round a copy and being like, fucking hell, that was violent. And I just feel like it's exactly the film it should be. And, whilst there are things you could critique, I think the answer is yeah, but it's not what it's meant to be. What it's meant to be is this. Yeah. And what this is incredibly engaging, incredibly thought-provoking, incredibly exciting. At its core is a really interesting premise. And you really do, I don't think you... Well, at least I imagine as a kid you probably did jump and stuff. I didn't particularly jump, but I was like, whoohoo! I made that noise a lot. Yeah. And you do... when... There's a bit where when they... Obviously, spoilers throughout. When they hack the system...
I just to add, I recommend it too. So if you haven't seen this film, before Chris gets into his spoiler thought, I just want to say, go see it, because this is one we're absolutely going to be recommending. It sounds like I can't speak for Chris, but I think he just said that. So 100% I recommend. So go watch it if you want before you listen to this, because we will now go into more detail. And you can carry on, Chris. Sorry to interrupt.
So spoilers. When they hack the system and then die, you feel like the film has invested you in these, whilst, those guys in particular, we don't get an awful lot of screen time with them, but we get enough that when they hack the system and you realise they're about to drive a bomb into the building, into the school, you're like, fuck yeah, come on! And that kind of, suddenly in your head, you're painting a picture of the final act of this film, and that doesn't come because they all get killed, and you genuinely feel that pain, and you're gutted you didn't get to see that, where at the end, because whilst one guy villain dies, essentially the bad guys fundamentally get away with it in this film. They're all dismissed, and that scene where the generals and stuff that put these kids through all this just fuck off. You just feel like you feel that, and I think it's incredibly captivating, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. It's interesting, isn't it? About it's impossible to define this, because we were talking about when we review something and we have that thought of, I think it's what they were going for. You are at essence making an assumption, because we obviously don't know.
Completely.
But it is, sometimes you just inextricably feel like something is a very deliberate choice, and when something feels like a choice, not a mistake, you give it way more leeway. When you go, they've just chosen to make this kind of movie, not this kind of movie.
Yeah.
You don't, it's not a valid criticism to you anymore, because you that's not what they were going for. You've imagined something different in your head, and that's you can't levy that against the creatives of this film. This is what I think they wanted this film to be exactly. And while I totally agree with you, maybe if I was handed this project, there are things I might have handled differently. Maybe I would have made the cast a little smaller, just so we could focus on a few more characters a bit more in depth. A few little details like that. But it would have been a different movie to this one. This one's designed to be kind of pulpy and fun in a way that makes you question yourself. Because it is fun. It shouldn't be. It's horrific. It's children murdering each other, but there is something about the way they do it that makes it kind of pulpy. It kind of like a Quentin Tarantino sensibility. You know what I mean? Where it's you shouldn't be enjoying it, but you are kind of reveling in the horror of it, if that makes sense.
And I think that's reverse, and I know this film and obviously others like it inspired Tarantino, but it's kind of that, it's when someone says, "Oh, this band sounds like this band," and you go, "Yeah, but that band came first." And so I think it's not obviously, this inspired Tarantino, but because we grew up with Tarantino, I mean, in this case, you grew up with this film, but I think you kind of, if this was the first violent movie anyone ever saw, I think, you would get that sense of like, oh, fuck. And you'd be like, should I enjoy this? But because we're used to that sort of almost cartoon-esque violence, because it is more cartoon violence than, I think, gore violence, in the sense of like, a lot of the violence is quite quick. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Saw, where, it's slow and you really see, I don't know, eyes gouge out of their sockets or whatever. It's very quick. It's like a hyper violence. So whilst it is an incredibly violent movie, I don't overly think it's a particularly gory movie. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's interesting that, isn't it? Because in my brain, whenever someone asks me we talk about the film, I do sort of think of it as being a gory film. But on rewatching it, there is gore in it. But you're right; it's sort of quick and doesn't go to the trouble of emphasizing each bit of pain that the person is feeling having it happen. It all happens quite quick. The idea is there, but what they actually go through, whereas like movies that came later, that sort of tried to take the way this handles like gore and violence even further. So your Hostels, your Saws, they really revel in slowing it down and letting you feel the pain of it. Like the end of the first Saw, particularly, I always think of as the guy soaring through his, and he's screaming. Like, you're not even necessarily seeing it, but the fact they do it so slowly makes it just much more visceral. And this movie is more focused, I think, on the horror and the upsetting nature of the notion. So it's not trying to upset you through excessive amounts of blood or visual violence. That's there, but again, as Chris pointed out, it's quite quick when it happens. This movie tries to lean into how horrific the idea of making teenagers, children, essentially, do this sort of stuff to each other. And it really focuses on that element. So it does have an upsetting element to it, but it's not the one you automatically think of when you think of the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it got itself into a lot of controversy. Because I don't know if you're aware, but it took a long time to come out in America because no distributor wanted to touch it. They were like, they thought they'd get sued. Like, there's a bit of that in the truth. Germany banned it for many years. Like, it's yeah.
Speaking of reaction, can I just say for anyone, I am aware, just because I do know this and want to correct myself because I've suddenly realised it may sound like I am aware that Tarantino started directing before this film came out. But
yes.
Kill Bill I think was after this film. I think if this was because I know this was 2000, I think Kill Bill was like 2003, 2004, something like that.
And he actually took a cast member from this film.
Oh yeah,
he's labelled this like one of it. He did say this is one of his favourite movies, and then he cast. I'll get the name up because it seems fair. Chiagi Kuriyama, who played Chigusa in this film, and she got to play Gogo Yubari in Kill Bill Volume 1. He was a huge fan of her in this film and this film in general, and that's some truth I can remove now, so I don't have to do it again later. But yeah, she's great in Kill Bill, and what a great casting choice to bring her across from this. She in this is the girl that stabs the guy in the dick.
Yeah,
which is a sentence that no other movie. How many movies do you get to? There is something cathartic about that scene, particularly. We'll talk about some of the deaths later, but definitely a point of inspiration for Tarantino for sure. He very much enjoyed this, and like I said, nicked one of the cast members. So that's quite a
high praise indeed.
That's quite a statement, isn't it? Yeah, so I think it is a really good film. For those who don't know the premise, I guess we should clarify. I mean, if anybody has decided not to watch it but is still listening to this, just to clarify, it's sort of set in like an alternate sort of future of Japan where like the country's gone to shit and the adults are basically blaming unruly teenagers that have no respect, and they basically have this program. I guess it's intended to scare them straight, but they don't seem to know about it, which is kind of a weird contradiction. I want to talk about that in a minute, because either I've misunderstood something, or it's something that makes more sense in the book, maybe. I don't know. But basically, the idea is that they put them in this thing called the Battle Royale program, where they choose a class a year to basically go through this horrible experience where they're basically all just put onto an island, and if there's only one of them alive in, I think, 3 days, that one can live. But the rest, but if there's more than one alive at the end of the 3 days, they all die. So they are then given a weapon and a bag with some supplies each, and off we go to the races. And it is, if you've seen Hunger Games, you kind of have an idea, but it takes a very different approach. So yeah, we'll start with that. My point, I guess, about that, because I am curious, Chris, because I took it as a, this will get kids in line if they know that adults can punish them this way, sort of thing. But if this is the 4th year this is happening, or 3rd year this is happening, at least, these kids don't know about it. So
yeah, that element isn't clear at all, because
I wondered.
I'd almost not have, especially that opening where it's presumably there's the girl with the doll, and it's presumably a previous, or the competition that's just finished or something, and they have all these cameras and these press and are treating it almost like it has Hunger Games style aired like a TV show or something, or at least everyone knows about it. And then when the kids are taken there, they're surprised and they don't know about it. So it's odd that the lines, I'd almost take out that first scene and just have this be an underground thing. But then I suppose the message of, well, it's to teach kids, to respect, is then lost. It's that
slightly
element
confusing.
Of it isn't clear at all.
I was tempted to, because it was originally a book, and then the guy who wrote the book turned it into a manga, and I was tempted to acquire one and read it before this. Of the two, read some of the manga or read the book. But the only problem is I think we should be reviewing the film, and I didn't want to get into these are the differences, because that's a whole mess in itself. And frustratingly as well, I found out that the English translation of the manga, instead of just translating it directly, they handed the Japanese manga this is very uncharacteristic for the industry. Normally manga just gets a direct translation. Somebody just goes through, translates it as best they can, as close as they can to the original text, and puts it out. But they actually hired an American writer to sort of essentially rewrite it. And he made loads of changes. In the manga, if you read it in its original Japanese, it's pretty much like this, in that there's no cameras, it's not being filmed or anything. But in the American version, he sort of adjusted it to be, it's filmed, it's on TV. And I just got that context from research, and that just makes me not want to read the English translation of the manga at all, because that just sounds like it sounds. So maybe I'll dig out the book at some point. But yeah, I wonder how much more context the book gives to that element specifically, because I am interested in the world building of this film, and it's done here where it's kind of it's subtle, it's background, so you don't mind if there's some inconsistencies, because you sort of go, someone's figured this out. I don't have all the information watching the film, but because the film isn't really about that. They're hinting at a wider world, but it's not really what the film is actually about. It's about these kids in this situation. So your focus goes to that, and you don't mind so much. But it does ring like a slight inconsistency to me, that whole thing. So I don't know if someone has the answer, or maybe I'll just dig out the book and find out if the book explains it.
It's funny, you do watch this, and I just did sort of go, I'm shocked there's not 5 sequels to this, and 2 spin-offs, and a reboot. And I know it might be in your trip, but I know they were at one point planning a reboot. And then the Hunger Games came out, and basically they said people would think it was copying Hunger Games and wouldn't realize it came first.
That's in the truth.
I assumed it would be. So I get that, but it's there's such a rich world here. It's kind of I'm shocked that there isn't more battle royale universe.
Yeah, there is a sequel, which I've just realized this week I've never actually seen. So at some point I'll dig out that sequel and watch that. I don't know why I never saw it, because I really enjoyed this movie, so I don't know why I've not bothered to watch the second one. But yeah, there was an American remake. I'll cover it now quickly just to cut down on the trivia later, and so I don't accidentally read it again. It was in development from the early thousands. Producer Roy Lee had obtained the rights eventually in 2006. And then after the release of The Hunger Games 2012, he stated the project had been cancelled because and this is the quote, Americans would just see it as a copy of Hunger Games. Most of them wouldn't even know that Battle Royale came first. It's unfair, but that's the reality. So,
I think it's a sensible decision.
Yeah, I think, rather than just pushing it out and being like, look, it's a Deep Impact Armageddon situation, they were just like, well, we won't do it then. Someone's got there first.
But I think it is ripe for a kind of reboot TV series. I think
it is too. A TV series is a really good. I think I would love to see a more expanded version of this across a TV series. And I will say as well, in terms of copying the Hunger Games, I do think it's a little exaggerated how much these two things had. The basic idea of children being forced into a situation where they have to kill each other until there's one left is it. That's it. That's where they start and end.
All the district stuff, all the external world, like and that's why I think in a way it'd be best as a TV show, because you could do the external world stuff, you could flesh out that, and it would be so different to Hunger Games, which is sort of this dystopian 12 whatever districts thing, isn't it? I can't really remember.
Well, it makes a big difference to the tone, doesn't it? Because these children feel like children because they've come out of a school, they're talking about having crushes and going, I'm on the track team or whatever. The kids from Hunger Games already live in a dystopian future. So it doesn't feel as much of a fish out of water situation for those kids, whereas these kids are like pampered, slightly spoiled teenagers, from something vaguely similar to our world, So
which is weird because their parents didn't like them enough. Like he says at one point, your parents have been informed. It's like, can we explore that a little bit more?
Yeah, I did wonder about that, and Nadia and I were talking about that. We were wondering if that was like a cultural thing, because obviously, like in China with like the one child rule and stuff, like government having control over those kind of aspects of your life, maybe in Asia doesn't seem as so far fetched. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's more of an acceptance of that idea in Asian culture.
That someone could take their children and pit them to the death.
I mean, the pit them to the death part is where the movie steps outside it, but the idea of governments stepping in on things like your children,
right? Yeah.
When a neighboring country had, like the one child policy and stuff, it doesn't seem far fetched enough that you couldn't imagine an apocalyptic future or sort of like a near future where your country goes that way too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess that's in a way why we've started in a way our conversation about this film with it's a shame not to get more context to that outside world, because because of the kids' reactions, it's easy to forget, because you're right, actually an apocalyptic future is enough of an explanation for why the parents go along with it. Yeah. But we don't see enough to be constantly reminded that it's an apocalyptic future.
Yeah, it probably, and that's my point. Is actually it tries to have its cake and eat it too, because it tries to present this as a near future possible thing where it's all gone wrong and the country's in disarray or whatever, and that's why they've resorted to this. But at the same time, these kids are like normal, pampered kids being thrown into a really like violent fight for their lives, and having to scramble to survive. These are not kids equipped. They're not kids trained. They weren't ready for this, So it's kind of trying to have its cake and eat it too, I suppose, in many ways, because it's like, what is it? Is there an apocalyptic key? How bad has the country got? And are there riots? Because if so, these kids are woefully underprepared for violence. You know what I mean?
Apart from the one that's bitching at hacking.
Yeah. There's two kids. Well, three really, if you count Kawada, who's been in the competition previously. But obviously, Kuriyama and not Kuriyama. Kuriyama and Mitsuko, the girl with the scythe. Those two are just like lunatics. Like those two seem to revel quite a lot.
But again,
in there.
And again, you kind of. With her, you go, she must have a horrific backstory, which has made her like this. Even with the hacking kid, I was like, he's done well. And then I thought, well, we see them all pick up their bags and then get given the army bags. So maybe that laptop, he's not found a laptop and has managed to create this from scratch. Maybe he was already a hacker. His laptop was in his bag and he just adapted his hacking program to hack this system. So you can... It is funny how we've seen films that have given less and picked it apart more. Literally, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I believe from some brief reading that actually her backstory is explored more in the extended edition. But you kind of, it's amazing how like that whole hacking thing. I'm fansplaining that, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm like, cool, that's what it is in my head, no problem. It's amazing how like, I guess because, like you say, you just make the assumption of, well, we're meant to fansplain it, it's fine. And I can't quite pinpoint how this film gets away with that. But it really does.
It does. It creates like a situation where you just sort of go with it. Like you're just on board. Like you just sort of like, you find yourself not really questioning much. You find yourself just sort of engaged with it. And I don't know what the secret sauce is that makes that work, because you're right, there are films with arguably less things to pick apart that we have picked apart. This film definitely has gaps, but every gap you just assume is like, well, it's because that's not what the movie's focusing on. But what is the difference though? What's the difference between A and B in that case? I have no idea how they make it work. I guess it might be something to do with the tone, because the film has quite a tongue-in-cheek tone from minute one, especially with its approach to some of the violence. Like, I think it's important to note the tone is set very early in this film. One of the first deaths is the teacher watching, which is what, by the way, that teacher character is one of the best characters in this movie. In fact, no, I think he's the best character in this movie. That actor, I wrote his name down because I wanted to make sure I gave him some credit. Takeshi Kitano, who plays, I think the teacher is literally called Kitano Sensei. Which is funny because that's the actor's actual name. So he's amazing, and there's a bit early in the film where he puts on a video to explain what it is, and she's like, hello, and he's like, hello, and he's clapping along, and he's getting excited and chanting along, and all the other kids are just looking on in horror, and then someone talks, and he's like, don't talk, and he throws a knife right into, like, in the middle of her forehead, and she just falls dead. And it's quick but very visceral, and it's shocking, and because you assumed they were at least safe from him. The point was they kill each other, and then he turns around and just plays the video some more and carries on, and it's funny and shocking and upsetting, and it's automatically sort of setting itself in a reality apart from our own. Does that make sense? Like, it automatically is setting a tone that doesn't match. It's not gritty, it's not realistic, and it's not pretending to be. And I think maybe that is the line. Maybe the movies we pick apart more are the ones that really try to emphasize realism, but then have all these holes. Whereas this movie is a hyper-reality. It exists within a hyper-reality. And as a result, you're less likely to nitpick the logic, I think. Maybe that's it.
Do you think also psychologically, because it's a foreign film, psychologically, you go, I don't understand that, but maybe it's lost in translation.
Yeah, or maybe it's a cultural thing. Yeah, we were talking about that as a potential explanation for some of the gaps. Because we talked about as well, like, it seems a bit of an extreme response to kids just not respecting adults enough. And then we were sort of talking about how, well, actually in Asian culture particularly, respect of your elders is like a huge thing culturally over there. And it's something that's very important to them. If somebody was to disrespect an older person, they'd get a beating. Like, it's very, very looked down upon culturally. And so it's. I think the beating thing was like an exaggeration. Obviously, I'm just saying, like, you would be treated seriously if you were disrespectful to an elder in Asia in general, certain parts of it. Definitely in Japan. I'm pretty sure China as well. So we wondered if maybe that, like, with that context, with that culture, you might maybe be a little bit more forgiving of that too, because the initial reaction we had when was when we were reminded that was the reason for this all happening. We were just like, wow, really? That seems like an extreme response. They didn't show up to class. Now you're all going to kill each other in a Hunger Games style setting.
Yeah, but again, you just go dystopian future. Do you know what I mean? That's what's so,
Yes.
It's Star Wars. It's the equivalent of Doctor Who's timey-wimey, and Star Wars is in a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay. I got a question.
Yes.
I don't necessarily feel this way, but I think someone could, so I'm asking it. Do you think there's too much time dedicated to who's in love with who's got a crush on who, or do you think that adds a school child texture to the film?
Yeah, the second, I think. When we were watching it, every moment that was like that was either funny, so they got away with it just on me being amused by two people talking about that in this situation. It's like when they talk about, like, well, we're going to be dead soon. Should we bone? Like, there's an element of, that's hilarious. That's exactly what a teenager would do. And I do actually think,
felt very real. Very, very real.
Yeah. And there's a part of me that thinks, like, a lot of the sort of upsetting nature of this film, watching children essentially pitched in a battle to the death, only works because you do believe their age. And when I think to how the movie achieves that, I think that's one of the ways they do it. Making them care so much about who's got a crush on who, and which cliques they're in. Like, there's an early murder where one girl comes to another place and finds another, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't really know I don't really get on with your group, but you seem okay." Like, and it's all about the high school politics, the teenager politics, is just driven throughout the whole movie, and it's a big part, I think, of why. If America remade this movie, they'd be all played by 20-something-year-olds. Pretending to be sort of 15, 16-year-olds, and half of that stuff would be gone. You know what I mean? And it wouldn't have the same impact. It was what Hunger Games ended up doing. In Hunger Games, there are a couple of quite young people in there, but like a lot of them, like, I mean, how old was Jennifer Lawrence when she did Hunger Games? Like 20s easily, right? Like, and I think one of the things that makes again, you keep using the word horror. It's not really a horror film, but there is something unsettling about it. And I think it comes from that. I do think it comes from that. So if you take that stuff out, I don't think it works. I mean, I don't know if you agree or don't agree. I guess by asking the question, you're still unsure yourself, maybe?
No. I was just thinking, like I said, I can't really pinpoint why, but any critique, I'm like, it doesn't matter. The film's not meant to be that. So no, but it was definitely something that I felt in moments. I could understand someone saying, but no, I didn't feel that way at all, because, like you say, I think it makes it feel very real and makes them feel like teenagers. And I think the central love story between the our main two protagonists was done really well, and again plays out in a very real, do they like each other? Maybe they don't kind of way, and again that feels incredibly right for the point in their lives that the characters are in. So yeah,
and it's attention to detail as well. Like they if you watch the opening scene again after you've seen the whole movie, she hands him the cookies in the opening scene. Like, it's not there. You're just sort of like, you're immediately overwhelmed by 40 characters. So it's hard to, like, initially you're trying to keep track of who's who and who has what relationships, and once they become the couple, if you go back to those early scenes where it might have been easy to misremember who was into who, you can, because again, you're introduced to like 40 people straight away. That their relationship is clear early on, really early on. And then another little detail I love is that towards the end of the movie, those cookies turn back up. The teacher has them. And he's eating them
throughout. He eats them earlier in the movie as well.
That's great.
Yeah, throughout the movie, he's snacking on those cookies. The teacher and her is a good point, because I had to really, like, as the credits were rolling, I was like, right, my interpretation is he's estranged from his own family and seemingly his own daughter, so he's latched onto her and wants her to survive as a kind of substitute daughter.
Yes.
But I then went online and went, oh, okay, other people seem to be saying the same thing. But again, And this is the closest I lean to like feeling that criticism myself. I could see someone finishing this and going, what the fuck was going on there? Like he's drawn her, like he's squirting water from a water gun at her. Like she had a dream about, I think in a way, her having the dream about him slightly confuses it, because it then implies that they have a history, or she's got a reason to think of him. If they played it so that it was all one-sided and it was just him kind of putting those emotions on her, I think it would be cleaner. But that is slightly muddled as well.
Yeah, it's her in that early scene, isn't it? So when she enters I believe it's I could be mixing up the characters now, because again, this is like from earlier in the movie, and it takes you a while to sort of figure out who's who. The teacher is in it's pre this all happening. The teacher is in the classroom looking morose, and on the board is written like, we're not coming to school today because we don't want to, and the class are just gone. And she's the only one who walks in and sees him and interacts with him. And he sort of gives her like a look and then wanders off. And then there's an incident where one of the kids actually like tries to stab the teacher, and she sort of covers for him by hiding the knife. And they exchange a look there as well. So I guess maybe she kind of knew that he sort of saw that in her earlier, which is why maybe the dream. You're right though. It's less clear. It's less clear that it could be, I think.
Like him shoot like the painting and stuff. Like you have to kind of, and maybe not. Maybe other people are like, no, I understood it immediately, but I had to think through what that was about personally. Yeah,
but I think as well, like you could easily go through this and miss that sort of element of the plot almost entirely. Like you can, I think you could just watch this as the movie that the sort of popcorn movie that's on the surface, just about a bunch of kids trying to survive this horrific situation. Does that, you know what I mean? Like it's
completely. But the themes, I love some of the elements of how they do the theme. I love that they cover, and again, this it's kind of a similar discussion to what we had about the Truman Show. These themes are there, but in something like a TV show, you could explore them further. I love we saw a variety of reactions. We saw, the guy at the beginning with the bow and arrow, just blind panic, like, okay, I've got to kill people, I'll try and kill people. Yeah. We saw people going, I'm not doing this, and committing suicide. We saw people going, these are my skills, okay, I'll execute my skills. We saw people trying to cheat the system and go, no, there must be a way of doing this without having to kill. Like, we really...
Yeah, we saw the girls that try to, like, bring peace to the island and tell everyone to stop fighting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then that other group of girls that wall themselves off and say, well, we're not taking part. We don't believe this is right.
They almost seem to, like... And that scene where they all get killed is incredible.
That's the best scene in the movie, right? Like, I was going to ask you this. There's a sequence, for those who don't remember, because you haven't seen it recently, there's a sequence where the girls who've decided they're not going to be involved in any of it. Like, I think it's like a lighthouse. They lock themselves inside and they're just existing. And one of the girls brings back Nahara. Nanahara? Nanahara. And
Nanahara is carried there by one of the other guys, isn't he? And I assume
yes, by Sugimura, the boy with the tracker.
Because they both jump in the water.
That's right. So he's not well. So they bring him there, and they're like, well, yeah, but one of the girls is like, I think I saw him kill someone, and because they've got they're so about not partaking, they're shunning anyone who is, and because there was a scene that one of the girls had witnessed earlier with the axe where they'd rolled down the hill, and Nanahara had come out of that alive, and the other kid had the axe in his head. She assumed he'd killed him, so she's planning on poisoning him because she doesn't want him in there if he's participated in the sort of game. But one of the other girls tries the food first and dies of clearly of poison, and then the paranoia just rips them apart. It just rips them apart because they're all assuming the other one did it. And ironically, none of them accuse the girl who actually did it. And it all goes tits up. They all end up shooting each other. And then the last girl standing is just like, how are we so stupid? Like, in the heat of the moment, that got so out of hand. And then the point that she makes at the end is, how stupid were we, to let our paranoia lead us to our own deaths? We didn't want to participate in the games. And then she kills herself. Yeah.
It's
just incredible. Like, that sequence, top to bottom, alone is like the best short movie you ever saw.
It's such a good exploration of how people would react in this scenario, and that heightened emotions and stuff.
Yeah, and as a result of doing all these different kinds of reactions, there's so many different kinds of deaths in this movie. You know what I mean? They're not all shooting, they're not all stabbing. There's a lot of different kinds of deaths. Some of them are slow and weird. Some of them are revenge based. Some of them are suicide. Some of them, and in the variation the movie creates as it goes along, is actually like one of the reasons I think it's so engaging. You know, because there's so many different kinds of deaths and action sequences in this movie. You know, some of them have a tension to them. Some of them are sort of like a bit more bombastic and explosive. Some of them are very dramatic. I don't know. Yeah, it really does run a gamut, this film. Like, it does a lot in its, hour and a half run time. It's not long.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting up now because it feels like I'm just confirming. It gets going quickly. Like, they're like in the game and fighting. I think within 15 minutes. But I might be wrong. Hold on.
Yeah.
The video finishes looking at this around. There you go. The game begins 19 minutes into the movie.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
And by that point, we've had some deaths and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. The movie does not waste any time. I suppose that if you were going to try and find a criticism, if you're looking for one, it does suffer from a little bit of the. And this sometimes I wonder if this is translation, or sometimes I just wonder if this is the way they write movies and TV shows in Japan, but it does suffer from a little bit of characters just telling you how they feel instead of showing it. And all along, I felt this way, like when, as much as it does clue us into her character, when Mitsuko dies, she says, I just didn't want to be a loser, which is such a very overt way of saying it. And it is a good moment. But I find when I watch like Japanese anime as well, the characters often very much say how they feel, and I feel like generally speaking, I prefer subtler dialogue, but it doesn't need it. It works well enough, and it keeps it tighter. I think because if you were going to do it subtler, you would need more time, and the movie just wants to focus on because it does move at a clip, and that pacing would be lost if we kept stopping to have characters more subtly explain their feelings.
Yeah, and like you say, it's hard to truly judge that because you don't know what's translation and what's
exactly as well. Maybe she didn't say something quite so overt in the original Japanese. Maybe it was written more subtly, and the more direct translation has led to a more overt line of dialogue. Yeah, I do wonder sometimes whether that is a taste thing. Do they just prefer more open stuff in Japanese sort of culture when it comes to their TV and movies, where it's a bit more direct, or is it written subtle and the translation takes some of it out, or is it a little of both? It might be a little of both, honestly. Hard to say. But yeah, I suppose as a somebody who's watching this, the subtitled version of this movie and feeling that way, I guess it is a valid criticism. I don't think it actually ends up affecting my enjoyment of this movie, but it is. I could see somebody feeling that way, if that makes sense. A bit like some of Chris's earlier, sort of criticisms that he was sort of saying could be, but aren't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not to. I imagine they are to some people, but they're
exactly.
Yeah, not to us personally.
Yeah.
What are some of your favourite deaths then?
I mean, it's really hard to get that. The girl's poison after the poisoning is incredible, but I do think there is something very cathartic about the boy. I've forgotten the character's name, who threatens to force himself on Chingusa, and she basically stabs him in the dick. I mean, that there's a poetry to that. It's such a simple, obvious thing to do, but it works really well, and it is very satisfying because it's like, yeah, like that guy, that's awful. Like, it's one thing for him to say, "Hey, we might be dying soon. Do you want a bone?" Like, he's asking, I guess, giving her the option to turn him down, but he's just like, well, screw you then, I'll force myself on you. And her response to that, to chase him down after he gets the arrow cuts through her face. It's just like a little mini revenge movie inside of this movie. It's great.
Especially
that's
because
good one.
I think you have this immediate affinity with that character because she's running, and he says to her, like, you're still training? And I just love her way of getting through it is to go, I'm just going to live my normal life.
Yes.
And see if I can get through it that way. And that's incredible. Like, that's again, like, give me half an hour devoted to just that idea.
Yeah.
You know?
An episode based on sort of each of these kids in the order they die, like sort of telling the story of their death. Like, it would be a great TV show. It really would. Her character, you know, is unfortunately then swiftly ended. But like, yeah, in that moment, she is a hero. And it's also the irony of obviously setting up that she was like a runner in school or whatever, on the track team or whatever. And then he tries to escape her. And it's like, dude, you know you're not outrunning the girl. That's the one thing you know isn't happening.
Yeah.
So it's her running that ends up helping her catch him. Do you know what I mean? Like it's weirdly poetic, but like very well done. What was your favorite death, or have we already covered it?
No, well, obviously the scene with the girls is fantastic, but it's almost like that whole scene is brilliant. Kiriyama, apologies if I'm not saying the name right, but his death and the events leading up to his death, where you're like,
spectacular.
How the fuck did he survive the explosion? And then you realise he's blind, and it just stunning.
Yeah.
Because I almost expected.
That's a great death.
How much were you expecting him to grab the tracker? Like, the fact that the tracker just sort of gets left on the floor was insane to me. And I guess that's why, like, I don't want to veer off of that death, but again, just this notion that, like, there's such a good plan there. Hack in, destroy the system, blow it up. Like, and that they just, in the end, the other dude has to blow up the car to try and kill this warrior who's just been after everyone, and just been and volunteered for the fucking game, and it's kind of like his death. It's exactly who we want to kill him. You feel vindicated that the character's died because he's just been an arsehole, but just that reveal of he survived, but he's blind, and seeing that kind of panic in him, and him knowing that he's probably now done for. But he's still just so fucking crazy that he's just shooting blindly anyway. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah, what a great character. Like, it's interesting that like they bother to give Mitsuko some sort of like backstory. You know, she's gone around with the scythe sort of very violently, like, because she's got this history, right? She's got this perception in the class that like of her that she's bucking, she's trying to like show them all, you know. She's got a chip on her shoulder, basically. You understand her motivation, and just as you really start to figure her out, then she's killed. But she's killed by Kiriyama, who is the other side of that coin, which is just he's a lunatic. There's no explanation for Kiriyama. They don't tell you. No. All you need to know about Kiriyama is that he volunteered, and you go, oh. Wow, that's an unstable human being.
How hard is it to get? Because they're, you know, those two, the two that joined that have played before. I can't remember the other guy's name, but they, you know, so they could have been
the main girl. The main boy is called Nanahara. The girl is called Nakagawa, and then the guy with the bandana that had been in the previous one was Kawada.
So Kawada and Kiriyama. They could have been, if they were written badly, they could have been the twins in The Matrix Reloaded. Do you know what I mean? They could have been henchmen, bad guys with no you know, backstory that you didn't feel anything for. It's so hard to write those kind of characters right, but they did a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Like, and again, there's no,
very little.
Like you say, we literally just get. They volunteered for this, and it tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then obviously we get the extra context for... we should talk about Kawada, because Kawada's another really great character. This movie's full of great characters. They're almost all great. What I do love is interesting as well is that our two leads are kind of intentionally left a little bland, because you kind of... They're your... They're you as an audience member's sort of window into this world of insane people who are murdering each other. You know, there are a lot of people in this world that are obviously normal as well, that are like resorting to stuff. But the two you most empathize with, I think, as you watch the movie, in terms of who you most see yourself in, are Nanahara and Kawagawa. Nakagawa. God damn. I knew I was going to mispronounce some names doing this. But what I do like about what they do with the other wilder characters that are around them is the characterization, and particularly Kawada, who is another sort of counterpoint to Kiriyama, because also kind of volunteered, but he has this whole history. He's been in it previously, lost, the girl, which for a minute they try to make you think isn't what happened. And then he made it up, but obviously that's part of the big double bluff of the ending. We'll come back to that ending in a minute, because I think the ending is really clever as well. The ending you do get, even if it isn't the hackers and the explosion, is a really satisfying one, but we'll come to that.
Definitely, yeah.
But his backstory and his explanation for why he's come back and his determination to sort of pull this thing apart, is kind of also very satisfying in a different way. It needs a bit more explanation than Kiriyama's, but I really like his character. You believe his character, and you also understand. I think in a worse movie as well, you'd spend the whole movie going, "Why isn't he just killing those two? Just kill those two. Just you're happy killing everyone else. Kill those two." But when you realize he kind of sees himself and his girlfriend in them, it all just sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that, and even I almost felt like he had some sort of code, because when he first meets them, the question he asks is, "What are your weapons?" And they say a pot and a pan and binoculars, and it's very clear that they're not going to kill him. And I almost thought he's got a code. Like these guys don't have a weapon of use, and they're not going to kill him, so he's not going to kill them. And I think it is, by the end, I agree with your reading. It's more he sees himself as his girlfriend, but he comes across as a very noble character.
Yeah, and I think they do that on purpose. They give you multiple reasons so that you don't spend the movie, because they don't reveal the backstory for him until later in the movie. You're looking at sort of end of the second act, early third act. I think you find that stuff out about him. So, in a way, that stuff I think there is a truth to that too. I do think there's an element of, you're no threat to me, so I'm not a threat to you. I'm not just going to go murdering a defenseless person. And I think they put that in there so that you accept that he's just spending this time with them without killing them early on. And that's what I was sort of getting at. In a worse movie, you spend the whole time going, "Why isn't he killing them? Why isn't he killing them?" And even at the end, when they reveal it, you'd go, "Yeah, but I just spent the whole movie wondering why." But because they give you a plausible reason early on, that he's got a code and they're no threat to him and all that stuff, they've not got any valuable weapons, and it is the first question asked, because they set it up that way, you stop asking that question. And you almost don't need another explanation, but the movie then goes to the trouble of giving you an even better one further down the line. So I think there is a surprising amount of depth to the choices made here, and that might just be a result of it being based on a very, very good, well thought out book. But this script is super tight. Despite some of the early sort of criticisms we talked about, a lot of that stuff can be easily waved away. I think, and stuff like that is a real testament to very tight, well thought out writing,
definitely.
So for sure.
So you're the ending's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so clever. So for those who don't remember, you think that he's finally, it's gotten to the last three, and he's turned and killed both of them, and it's done off camera, which immediately raises your alarm bells if you watch a lot of movies.
Yeah, you get quite annoyed. You're like, well, that was sudden.
Yeah. So I can't remember my exact reaction to the first viewing, because obviously I remembered that when I sat down to watch this, but there's a part of me going, I wonder how I reacted to the original time. Did I know, oh, they're fine, come on, they cut away. If you don't show the death happen on screen, no death happened. Or what did I get fooled by it? I'm not 100% sure. I would like to think I reacted by figuring it out, but I was much, much younger. Maybe I didn't get fooled by that, and maybe I did get caught out and I thought they were dead. But it's actually all part of their plan, which is to ambush the teacher guy when they all go out to get the bodies of the last two and to get the survivor out. So most of the military leave, and then they go to the center where the teacher is and sort of go to take him out. And it leads to one of my favorite moments in the whole movie. Because how many movies have you seen, Chris, where they think they've killed the bad guy and then he gets up again? Hundreds of times.
Yeah,
right? Always
it's brilliantly done.
Yeah. The version of that in this movie is purely played for comedy, and it is one of the best moments in the entire film. And I laugh so much every time I see it. remarkable. For those who don't remember, he's dead. It's all over. They think they've gotten away with it, and then her phone rings. And after a few seconds, the guy just sort of gets up, like, ugh, goes over, answers his phone, has his conversation, closes the phone, and then dies.
It's almost like it's almost Pineapple Express. You know, where I can't remember the actor's name, but there's that one guy who just gets killed multiple times and it just survives. It's just fine.
Yeah. I forget the actor's name as well. Let me look it up because it's getting my head in. Danny McBride, right? Red.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's a really great moment, but that ending is really good because even though it's not the sort of more bombastic ending that you're expecting, you've kind of already had your big action beat because you have the fight between Kiriyama and Kawada. So by the time you don't need a big explosive ending now. You're happy to get a more character based one. And that drawing he reveals and his sort of thing about sort of almost choosing who he wanted to win, like that stuff is super like weird and like, but like
and him appearing earlier to give her an umbrella and stuff. Yeah, and you just go, why? Has he appeared to help her? Has he appeared to bring them two back together? Like, it's odd.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's also interesting that if that was his plan, by the way, giving her a pair of binoculars, not the best move.
No.
Oh, well, actually, I suppose in a way it was because a lot of people she didn't get into many fights straight away because she didn't have a desirable weapon to be killed for, I suppose. Maybe that's the plan.
Yeah, and there's a few, in a way, that's another change I think I'd have made. Like, I'd have had her use the, because the pot pan comes in useful. Like, it stops, he uses it as a shield. So
yeah, someone tries to kill him with an axe, right? And he uses it
I'd have more instances maybe of the binoculars being used.
Yeah. It's a brilliant film. I think they do such a good job balancing the insane sort of hyper violence and hyper reality with some genuinely quite likable characters and quite engaging characters. I think it's a really hard thing to do, and I think that's part of why this movie is such a success. I think this movie gets into notoriety through its sort of almost gimmicky violence involving children, but I actually don't think that's why it maintains. I think the reason this movie is still discussed today and is still enjoyed today is because it is legitimately a good film. Like, it's not just a gimmick. It could have been. No. There are definitely movies I've seen that have come out of Japan that are basically just like intended to be shocking, you know, and they don't really actually, when you watch them, have a huge amount of substance. God, there are movies that come out of America that do that too, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about particularly about Japanese films today, but yeah, it didn't need to be more to sell itself. To be honest, it really didn't. It could have gotten away with much less. To be honest with you, and the fact that they went to such trouble to genuinely make a really effective film. I mean, hats off to them, right? Like that's 10
completely.
Points. Yeah.
Did you have any other notes before we triv it up?
I feel like I probably do. Let me have a quick scan. The teacher chanting along with the video. I wrote, "Give that actor an Oscar." It's funny. I did make quite a few notes about how much funnier the film was than I remembered.
It was very funny.
Yeah, my memory of it is a little bit more tonally serious than this, but this film doesn't take itself too seriously at all.
No, like you said, I think the funniest moment is the getting up after seemingly being killed and taking a phone call at the end. That moment's hysterical. And I suppose there are some of the more cartoonish deaths which I could see someone laughing at.
And a lot of the times the kids do the sort of teenagery stuff ends up being quite funny when they start like talking about who fancies who and who's in what cliques when around them people are being murdered. It's kind of
it is probably, I imagine, more cartoonish than you remember. There are moments where like these kids see horrific things, and in the next scene they're just talking about who fancies who.
Yeah. And it's and it's designed like that way to be funny. And maybe that's another thing that makes you. So maybe it's not just the hyper reality they create, but maybe it is the use of humor tells you the movie doesn't take itself too seriously, so then you don't take the movie too seriously.
Yeah,
Because
maybe.
the movie's not taking itself seriously. So why should you? Like, and not in a bad way. I think it's to its benefit. I think the fact that the movie doesn't take itself too seriously is part of what makes it so good. So yeah, that was in my notes too. But I think that's about it. Looking at it, most of this stuff we've sort of covered. Do you want me to shall I crack on with the triv, Chris?
Yeah, man. Let's hear the triv.
Give
me the triv, boy.
So yeah, I feel like this week I do need to acknowledge the song. Thank you for the song, Chris. Because last week I tried to make it smooth. I just carried on with the triv, mentally appreciating your song. But I think you need the pat on the back. Yeah,
I need the boost. I need the ego boost.
I need the ego boost. It's wonderful. It's a good song. Keep doing it. I like it.
People, you'll be surprised to hear this, mate, but people don't compliment my singing enough.
That does surprise me. That shocks me. Anyway, many members of Japanese parliament did try to get the novel banned when it first came out, but did not have much avail. When the film was released, they also attempted to ban that. Both efforts resulted in the novel and film becoming more successful as people bought the book and went to the movie to see what all the fuss was about. There's a history of that, I think, societally, isn't there? When they try to ban something, it ends up making it more popular. The worst thing you can do is try to ban a thing like this. It brings so much more attention to it. I cannot tell you how many copies I reckon Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat game, sold because, there was a big case going on in the US Senate about video game violence, and Mortal Kombat was at the center of it. I know
things like Grand Theft Auto as well.
Yeah, exactly. Every time there's controversy about a game like that, all you're doing is making kids interested in it. Stop it. It's stupid. Get rating systems in place so parents can be reliably informed about what they're buying. That is it. Don't banning stuff. Come on. It's actually one of the top 10 highest grossing films in Japan. I don't know if that's still the case, but that's what's in the trivia. So I don't know when this was added to the trivia and if it's still true, but it certainly was at the time of whenever that was written. I'll maybe look into that at some point as we talk. There's a magazine featured in the film containing bomb-making instructions that's used by Mimura and the gang, and it's titled Hara Hara Toki, which is the ticking clock. That magazine is a real bomb-making magazine published by an anti-Japanese government activist group that established themselves in the 70s. So that's a completely real thing.
Wow.
Which means that I suppose it may be on the Blu-ray version, if the quality is high enough, you could pause it and get bomb-making instructions.
Wow.
Well, yeah, another little moment actually I've just remembered of logic breaking, but I don't care because the movie doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a moment when he realizes that the bomb making guys, the hackers, realize that they're mic'd, and then there's a scene, I don't know, 5 minutes later. They do this whole thing where he types out the stuff he wants them to get because he doesn't want to say out loud that he's getting the ingredients for a bomb. But then 2 or 3 scenes later, those guys come back. And they go, we've got the sulfur and the thing and the thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have another conversation, but they all have their hands over the mics.
So that's 3 different ways. One way where they explain it because they're covering it, one where they just ignore it, and one where they're hyper aware.
Yeah, and again, the fact that you've only just realised that's the case is a testament to how much this movie just lets you go with it.
You do notice, though, it is odd how they're only listening once. We only see one incidence of that. Now, presumably, there's there's someone monitoring each person or whatever.
Yes,
but
they only show you that the once in that example.
Only at the end are they actually listening, or do we see them openly?
That's true.
With it on speakerphone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, it's got to be on speakerphone, Chris. Apparently none of the cast used stunt doubles in this movie. They did all the stunts themselves, which I think is quite crazy because, I don't know what child labour laws are in Japan, but I don't think you're allowed to do that in England. I think children must have stunt doubles because, they're children.
And they were all children. They weren't young looking 20-year-olds or anything.
My understanding is they were all sort of about 15, 16 years old, yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I might double check that, but yeah, that is my understanding of it. The movie is banned in South Korea due to its graphic, violent scenes. Yeah, that tracks. So here we go. So for 11 years, the film was not officially released in the United States or Canada due to a myriad of corporate and legal concerns on part of Toei in Japan and the prospective North American studios. Despite the fact there was a mutual interest in getting it out because it had been such a success in Japan, it had been a huge hit. It was said that in 2005, a representative of a US distributor and Japanese executives were sort of advised by American lawyers who attended a test screening that they would go to jail if this film ever gets a mass release.
Wow.
So in response, Toei then attached a bunch of rules and costs and legal criteria for any possible North American distribution deal to protect themselves. So if you choose to release this and you do get sued, you're taking that cost, not us, essentially, was what Toei were doing. This basically made it harder to distribute, though, because the only companies that could afford to take a hit if that happened were the big distributors who weren't willing to take the risk, and the small distributors who would normally take a risk on a foreign film, didn't have the money to cover it if that happened. So it kind of made the film unreleasable, not through being banned, but just through everyone was too nervous to basically pull the trigger.
So when did it eventually come out in North America?
So it says for 11 years it wasn't out. So from 2000 to 2000, I guess 2011, 2012 must have come out finally.
But there must have been bootleg copies, people going to Japan and bringing it back and stuff.
You are exactly right. So a representative from the prospective US distributor criticised Toei for expecting a wide release rather than a limited art house run, noting in the US it would never get past the ratings board and major theatre chains will never play it unrated. If you cut it enough to get an R rating, there's no movie left. So what ended up happening was most American audiences became familiar through the film through bootleg and region-free international copies. So, the copy I've got, I think, is a UK release, but I bet it's region-free. I'm looking at the DVD now. Released by Tartan Asian Extreme, which is the name of the group that released it, distributed it. Wow. My copy's from 2002. It's PAL. Okay, so this wouldn't play in America, but some countries do have like region-free releases. So if it gets released in that country, it can then be imported to America and played on their DVD players, no problem. In 2011, an American home distributor, Anchor Bay, managed to finally come to a licensing agreement with Toei, and the film began streaming on the American video rental service Netflix. I don't know if you've heard of it, Chris.
I have heard of Netflix.
So later that year, it had its first general North American theatrical run at a theatre in Los Angeles. That was 11 years following its Japanese release. And on March 20th, 2012, they gave the film and its sequel their first official US DVD and Blu-ray releases. So it's now available to buy on DVD in the States. It took them a while, but Germany banned the film too. But they didn't ban it until 2013.
What, 13 years after it?
Yep.
Been released in. That's amazing.
Yep. I have no idea what the story is there. Did some politician just find the DVD and go, "This is a problem"? When did this come out? We've not banned this yet. The ban was actually eventually appealed and overturned by the German distributor, who are a company called Cape Light Pictures. They actually successfully got the ban overturned, and a couple of years later, it looks like. I don't have the exact timescale on that. It's all been a bit vague, but yeah, they did get it overturned in the end. But I think that's quite funny. So the director celebrated his 70th birthday during this film's production. The director of this film is actually a reasonably elderly man, like for a film director. That's power to him for such an energetic movie at his age. Very sadly, he actually passed away 2 years later during production of the sequel, ending his sort of 40-year career in the director's chair, which is remarkable, by the way, as they'd say on Kevin Smith podcast. Big bucket or win.
Definitely.
He actually had only shot one scene for the follow-up film with Kitano when he died, and his son took over and finished the film and then dedicated it to his father, which I think is nice.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah. So yeah, at some point I will watch the second one. I'm kind of curious now.
Yeah, same. I'm quite intrigued by it.
And also,
I've heard like it wasn't it was criticised. It wasn't as sort of, it didn't get as good reviews and stuff.
Right.
But it sounds like it. What challenging circumstances to make a film in, So I really feel for his son, and obviously feel for him, and what an honourable thing for the son to take it on as a tribute,
Yeah, wonderful, and also like I do wonder if some of those negative reviews may be partly responsible, because I tried to find a reason why I never saw the sequel, because when I realised that was out there again, I was like, I must have known that existed. I can't have not known, but at some point I've forgotten, I guess, because when I watched this and saw there was a sequel, I was like, wait a minute, have I seen that? I don't think I've seen that, and I tried looking for like an explanation. Was it banned? Was it hard to come by? And the only thing I could find that might explain me dismissing the sequel out of hand is that it didn't get particularly strong reviews. So maybe I just went, I don't want to sit through a bad sequel if I can avoid it. But yeah, I definitely want to check it out upon rewatching this first one. So I'll probably dive into that at some point. I don't think we'll necessarily cover it for this, but I certainly want to have a look.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look. So now we've covered all the sort of, just before I do the last few bits of triv, very quickly, the big question, Chris. All this fuss, film being banned, deemed inappropriate. When I saw it, I did feel like it was, as a kid, there was an element of part of what was exciting about seeing this film was that it was a film I wasn't supposed to be seeing, and it did feel very extreme, especially to young me. Less so these days. Do you think it's warranted? Do you think there's much harm in this film? Do you think that there's some element of truth to the idea that maybe it's inappropriate to have graphic violence depicted specifically against children in a film, which seems to be the crux of most people's complaints?
Yeah, I do, especially 20 years ago. I do understand why it caused the controversy. Do I feel that way about it now as a 30-something watching it in 2021? It's 2021, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Like, do I feel that way? No. But can I see, why it did in 2000? Yeah. In the same way that, I can see why Psycho caused controversy when that came out in whatever year. So,
yeah.
Personally feel that way? No. But I think it's quite hard to judge in the circumstances in which we're now watching it.
Right.
And it is always one of those things where I'm willing to bet with a bit of digging could probably find 20 films from before then that are worse. But I guess you things shift. I've not seen a lot of them, but something like 16 Candles was considered a classic and is now considered horrific, and quite rightly from my understanding of that film. So. But you can't go, well, 16 Candles came out before this, because that unfortunately was not how people were viewing that film at that time. So I think anything like this is incredibly hard to judge in that, with all of that.
Because time shifts the context, doesn't it? And that you're watching it within, and that completely rewrites your reading of it.
Yeah, completely. But I can see why it caused that reaction at that time, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where I stand on it as well, which is like, I understand the response. I don't personally agree with that. I mean, look, I watched it at a young age. I'm who they thought they were protecting. They I guess what they're always talking about. It's always for the children. Think of the children. When they do this sort of stuff, banning movies like that. And I saw a lot of the movies I wasn't supposed to see at a young age. And I haven't murdered anyone yet.
Yeah, and it's a stereotypical thing for someone that doesn't live in America to say, but you also don't have access to guns as easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? It is hard to sort of pinpoint where the line is, because I suppose it's easy for me to say, well, I turned out fine, but I'm one person, and I guess the idea is there are people out there who are less capable of separating fantasy from reality.
Yeah, because
maybe that's who the concern is, I suppose. So it's a bit flippant for me to say.
I don't think, and I say that, I know I've just made you can't simplify any of it. You know what I mean? It's not down to media. It's not down to access to guns. It is an unfortunate different cocktail of different things for different people that choose to do that. There is no one singular thing for every individual that has ever attacked someone.
No, and I think regulating, like, banning, like, content and films and video games is not the right step. It's you have to look at informing parents so they make smarter decisions for their kids, because the best people to judge whether their child is capable of handling a film is the parent in question. I often speak of me sneaking and watching these sort of films around my parents' backs because I had a TV in my bedroom, but the reality is, if they thought I was the sort of kid that was a danger to anyone or a concern mental health wise, and that I was being affected by these things, then they would have been stricter. I wouldn't have had a TV in my room, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's an element of control that happened through my parents. So if you're educating parents about what the thing in question contains, then I guess then the concern is you're putting the burden of not controlling it, but deciding on the parents, really, which is where it should be.
Yeah, and I think it is that because I was about to bring up, I wasn't allowed to watch Jurassic Park as a kid because they hadn't seen it, but my parents thought it looked too violent, so I wasn't allowed to watch it. I was watching, and they didn't have a problem with me watching Power Rangers. Now, I think you could make an argument that there's potentially more influential violence in Power Rangers for a younger kid than there was in Jurassic Park. But they didn't know what was in Jurassic Park. So yeah, I think a system that somehow informs parents better is the only way you can do it when it comes to kids, or having more awareness of what their children are watching. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. or at least attempting to. But as you said, part of the problem with that is the minute you ban something, that makes someone want to watch it. So
yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? We're not equipped or qualified to answer these. These are big questions beyond our skill set.
Completely.
But that's my thoughts on it anyway. So shall we get to the end of the? We'll get through the. I say through. It'll be a pleasure, Chris. But I'll phrase it as that anyway. We'll plow through the last of the trove, and then we'll talk about what we're going to watch next week. So that painting of the students, from the end of the movie, was genuinely painted by the guy that plays the teacher, Takeshi Kitano.
Wow!
I don't know if they went for that on as a they did. They went to do that as it'd be funny if the actual guy did it, and it might look a bit shitter on purpose. Because it is kind of like a the painting is kind of very crude. I don't mean crude in that it's violent or anything. I just mean it's very crudely done. It's
quite impressed.
It's not a bad painting, but it is also You wouldn't be surprised to have seen it come from a child.
Yeah.
Or a teenager. In terms of its the actual quality of the artwork. But I thought it was a really funny detail. I hope that's one of those pieces of trivia that you read and then I go, I better look up that that's true. But I can't find too much information about it online. So I'm reading it out and just praying that I'm not going to get corrected because I want that to be true so desperately.
Yeah, that's true. But I kind of think
it almost sounds too good to be true. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because even earlier in the film where we saw him with drawings, we never see him drawing. It almost makes me go, well, why didn't you show that more? Why didn't you, if the actor could draw, show it?
Yeah, unless he sort of just did it in the privacy of his home and then brought it in finished to the set one day. I did it, and they were like, you did that? Great. Let's get this in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. Many of the students end up with different weapons in the movie to the novel and manga, which were actually quite close to each other. There's a list. I'm not going to go through it. There's just a huge list of who ended up with what and what was different. Google it if you want to find out more. What I did think was interesting, though, there was quite a variation of weapons and items handed out. Yet towards the end of the movie, a lot of people with guns.
Yeah, but
I kept wondering where the guns were all coming from.
Yeah, but it started with what, 40 or 30?
I think it's 40. Yeah,
40. So there probably weren't more than 6, 7 guns. So
Yeah, I guess. I don't know, it just feels like everyone had a gun
Percentage-wise.
towards the end. The guy with the bandana had the shotgun. There was a couple of handguns going around. The guy had the Uzi. I don't know. I was just like, I was trying to keep track of it, going like, where are all these guns coming from? I mean, a couple of them
You
we know
probably
where they come
could-
from. But
You
like,
probably could track it. I suspect you could track it.
Yeah,
I
you're
suspect
probably
could go,
right.
this gun went from... Because fundamentally, we're gradually seeing the survivors, aren't we? And we did see a lot of people nicking guns. So I suspect it could be tracked as they nick a gun from them, they nick a gun from them.
yeah,
et
you're
cetera,
right.
et cetera.
Yeah. I would
'Cause there's a
love to know
fair
if that
amount.
actually tracks.
There's a fair amount of guns being pointed at, I can't remember his name, but that really kick-ass scene where there's a big group of the school kids and the one who volunteered, and he just shoots them all, nicks their gun and shoots them all down and stuff.
Is that the girls that are trying to call everyone to peace?
No,
With megaphone.
that's the guy where he's got the fan.
Oh, yeah. They're like the group of boys. Yes. Yeah, really early on, there's a group of boys.
Kiramara, that's the day. I apologies for my pronunciation again, but when the group of boys attack him and he's got the fan and he just like fucking, I think, drop kicks or
Yeah, he grabs the
destroys
gun,
them all.
turns it round, shoots at them with their own gun. That's a crazy scene. He kills like 5 kids in like a minute. If I was wondering, actually, he does have the highest kill count in the movie. Kiriyama, he kills the most people. Only followed up, I don't know. I can't remember the number he killed. It's high. The only other person who comes close, and she's not close at all, is Mitsuko, who kills I think 6 or 7. Yeah, so it's she's the one with the scythe. For those who don't remember. Yeah, okay, cool. So weapons different from the book, the other thing. Some of them got different stuff. I did like the variation.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
There were some really creative things. The guy that had the tracker, that was really interesting. Like, there was a lot of mixed up stuff. The taser was an interesting choice, a couple of knives. Like, yeah, there was a really good wealth of... Well, obviously someone went... Go on, sorry.
The guy with the tracker, his death was really tragic as well. And he was like, look, I've been in love with you for ages. And she's just like, what? That was done really nicely.
That was another good one. It's so many great deaths and moments in this movie. It really does. You're right. The more we talk about it, the more I think the TV show is the way to redo this. I'd love to see that.
Completely.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully not by Americans though. I'd be worried about Americans touching this.
Oh, I read a thing while we were talking on the Wikipedia page where it says this will send fear into your Dan. Hold on. Where was it? During the summer of 2012, the CW had been in discussions with the Hollywood representatives about the possibility of turning Battle Royale into an American television show. According to a spokesman, the talks were only preliminary, but if a deal could be reached, the network would acquire the rights to the novel. I can't pronounce the author's name. I apologise. Then unpack and expound on it for an hour-long dramatic series. Apparently, a CW spokeswoman confirmed only there had been discussion, but declined to comment further. So I assume that's not happening, and that's probably the worst version of a TV show of it, if we're honest.
Oh, that sounds horrible. Just to give him the credit he deserves, because I appreciate you comparing, but I'm going to give it a go because I think he deserves it. Koshun Takami is the author of the original book and manga.
And he absolutely deserves it, and I didn't mean to not pay tribute by not pronouncing.
No, I'm not suggesting you are. I look, Chris. You struggle to say J.J. Abrams. I think it's totally fair and reasonable for you to be worried about offending by mispronouncing a name. I figured I'd give it a go just to make sure he got the credit. Oh God, please don't do this. CW, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Big recommendations all round.
I've got two more little bits of trivia, Chris. Sorry. Apologies. The total body count is 48, by the way. But here we go, Chris. What you've all been waiting for. My famous segment, Chris, but it's a slight being adjusted this week, Chris.
Is it tanks exist or helicopters exist?
Helicopters exist. The
Yes.
helicopter in the movie is an Aerosfatile, I can't pronounce that, AS-355 Ecruliu 2 Twin Star. JA9957. Boom. Nice. And if you think we're done there, Chris, get ready. Cars also exist. Yeah.
Whoa.
The truck that Shinji uses to build his car bomb is a Honda Acti pickup truck. Boom.
Nice.
Love it. My world famous
Great.
segment.
Love
Vehicles
that segment.
exist.
Love that segment.
I just love that that's always in the trivia. It makes me laugh. The amount, like, if you'd have told me when I first started doing that as a joke, that I'd find some form of vehicle trivia every week, I wouldn't have believed you.
I can't wait till we do Fast and the Furious.
Well, yeah, we already did Italian Job, and that took me fucking 20 minutes, didn't it?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I definitely a big recommend. If you haven't seen it recently, I'd dig it back out. It's available through a couple of like streaming services in the UK through Amazon for like a subscription fee. I think there's a 7-day free trial. You can get it on. The DVD's out there as well. It's not too hard to come by. It's I think it's worth it. I think if you've not seen it in a while and you're thinking about watching it again, I recommend it.
I agree.
And if you haven't seen it at all and yet you've still listened to us ramble on about it for an hour and a half, I still say go for it. It's really good. Yeah. So, Chris,
Completely agree.
are you ready?
I am. I'm excited. So Dan, in lieu of me basically taking a choice of Dan's sort of brief for his choice, and we're then not doing we're not gonna make it a thing every week to have a brief. But Dan's sort of brief was essentially pick a movie he thinks I would have at some point chosen.
Yeah, because basically it seemed unfair that because Chris chose a movie I was due to choose, that it would then be my choice this week, and I would also choose a movie that I would choose, and therefore
that was my choice to do that though. So I personally wouldn't have seen it as unfair, but
yeah, it just felt a bit imbalanced. I like that this series is a combination of both of our sort of young tastes. Like I enjoy the juxtaposition, and let me tell you, juxtaposition we have because Chris, I have chosen for next week's film, we're going to be watching Saban's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie.
Oh, nice.
I don't know what you were expecting me to choose. What did you think I was going for? What was
that or Good Burger is where
yeah, Good Burger was the other thought. It just because of the sort of Japan connection, I thought that was like a nice counterpoint to Battle Royale. Although obviously that particular film is 100% American made, to the point where they had to retell the story of the film in the show.
And not build their own, like design their own suits and swords, and yeah, absolutely,
it's a whole thing. But I've not seen it since God knows when. I was very young.
We didn't rewatch it before we reviewed the reboot. Then no, we couldn't have done.
No, I didn't.
I have rewatched it as an adult. Tragically, I've got mates that have bought it for me on DVD and stuff. But yeah, no, that sounds great.
Yeah,
so to clarify, because you said Saban's, we're doing the Mighty Morphing Power Rangers, the first movie.
I think I said Saban's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, because I just enjoyed the full title. But is that one not Saban, that first one? It must be, right?
No, it was the remake where they really went on the whole Saban's Power Rangers thing.
Sure, but that movie is still a Saban product, though, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But less. Yeah. There was a really, pointed, all the mark, like the listing for the reboot in some cinemas was listed under S because it was Saban's, but whereas I think the other one is just known as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. Right.
Because I pulled up the trailer the other day before doing this, and I noticed the reason I put it as Saban's is because in the trailer for the 1995 movie, one of the first things that comes up in the text is Saban.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah. But I didn't know if you were doing it as a joke about how because when the reboot then wasn't overly successful, they dropped the Sabans from the marketing.
Amazing. So Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie from 1995, with good old Ivan Ooze and Morphin and all sorts. I remember a reasonable amount of this movie. I remember some of the bad jokes. I remember have a nice trip, see you next fall. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember my experience watching the trailer. So yeah,
very exciting. I got to see this I got to see that one in the cinema.
Same.
So obviously, it's going to be interesting to talk about because I think Chris has already referenced in this episode. He has a huge history with the Power Rangers. I was also a big Power Rangers fan as a kid. So it's going to be interesting. I think Chris has held on to his love of the Power Rangers over the years more than I have.
Power Rangers were a huge part of my childhood.
So I would say they were a bigger part of Chris's than mine. Although I was a huge fan, but the fact that Chris has managed to hold on to his deep-seated love for the Power Rangers through his adult life,
test it.
Can you name the
the 6 Power Rangers in this movie, Dan?
See, now I can't, because I do remember that there was some recasting happening. So I know that 2 or 3 of them aren't the ones I remember from the first series. Because I know Jason's gone, right? Trini's gone. And Zach's gone. Have I got that right?
Yeah, they'd gone. They weren't recast for the movie. They'd been recast. They
show.
weren't recast. The characters had been replaced within the show before the movie. So yeah.
Right. Yeah,
but that was going to be my trick, because I was going to see if you were going to go Jason, Billy, etc.
Yeah, I know Billy's in the movie, because I remember this distinctly being Billy without glasses. And that really bothered me.
Yeah.
And then years later, I remember finding out that he actually really had trouble wearing the glasses, and they gave him headaches because he never needed the glasses, but the Billy character needed glasses to make him, quote unquote nerd. So that poor actor for years suffered with headaches from these fake glasses they made him wear.
I wonder. Pull it up, Dan. Let's test me here. Pull up because I wonder whether I can do. Because I can do characters, but I wonder whether I could do cast as well. So
right, let me just look it up. Let me get it up first before you start, because otherwise I'm gonna Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. Here it is. But I do remember that Billy, Kimberly, and Jason are in this though. Not Jason.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So character wise, it's Tommy, Billy,
That's what I meant.
Kimberly, Rocky, Aisha, and Adam.
Yes.
Yeah. They're the 6 characters. So Adam is played by Johnny Young Boosh or something like that.
Bingo. This is incredible.
Rocky is Steve something, but
Yes.
I don't know the surname.
Do you want me to say it?
Yeah, go.
Cardenas.
Yeah.
Steve Cardenas.
Kimberly is Amy Jo Johnson.
Mm-hmm. That's one I could have got. The original cast
Billy,
I'm okay on.
Billy is David Yost.
Yes.
Tommy is Jason David Frank.
Correct.
I don't know the name of the actress that plays Aisha, I'm afraid.
It's Karen Ashley.
Karen Ashley, yes. And I want to say Ivan Ooze is played by by David something?
No.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Paul Freeman.
Yeah, Paul Freeman.
Bonus question for some bonus nerd points, Chris.
Bulk and Skull.
Bulk and Skull.
Bulk and Skull is, again, I want to say something like Paul Schneider.
You're very close. I give you that one. It's Paul Schreier.
Yeah.
Paul Schreier. Schreier.
And I want to say because he's Bulk.
Yes.
And I want to say it's Jason something that's Skull. Navi, something like that.
Navi, you're exactly right. Jason Navi. That's.
I don't know the name of the kid. But I remember there's a kid in it.
Oh, there is a kid in it. You're right. There's a kid. And
not as much as there's a kid in Turbo, but there's a kid in this.
Yeah, there's a kid in this. If I remember rightly, he's like our point of view character, because when I remember the climax of the movie is the parents all get brainwashed, and the kid's parents is amongst them, and that's kind of like the stakes. Is that it's the kid's parents that are under threat. From Ivan Ooze's mind control. Oh man, I can't wait.
And I
remember a lot more of the movie than I thought. Actually, now I come to look at it.
I think the most offensive is the CGI Zords. But anyway, we'll come to that next week.
Yes, we will.
Reel off where the peeps can find us, Dan.
Yes. Well, you can find us in many places. First of all, if you'd like to hear that episode right now, and you're listening to this through like YouTube or Spotify or whatever, you don't have to wait a week. If you're not already on the Patreon, you can go find it there. Patreon.com/nothing but static. Oh, I've just remembered we haven't done our question of the week, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear. Oh, we're going to get caught out here because I don't have a proper... I wanted to research this question. All right, give me a sec. I'm going to read it out anyway, and we're going to...
Can Chris name the cast of the Power Rangers movie? Because
it's covered that. Not. I'm sadly, it's not. Okay, so Latty asks... I'll ask who your favourite HoloLive member is to force you down a rabbit hole a little. Now, I looked into this, and this is going to expose how old and out of touch we are. Now, HoloLive is a VTuber agency, HoloLive Productions. VTubers are virtual YouTubers, so it's a YouTuber or a streamer that doesn't have their own face on screen, but an animated character that is like animated on the fly as they talk, and like moves with their lips and moves with their... Like, I don't know if they're face tracked or what. I don't watch any of this stuff. I don't know who any of these people are. I'm so old and out of touch. I think it's cool that it exists, but I don't have a favorite. Is the answer? Is the honest answer? I could pick one. I mean, I could quickly Google it now and be like, I guess it's one of them. I could point my finger at a picture and say that one, I guess. Let's have a look. I
mean, we rarely put our faces on.
Yeah, we don't have a virtual avatar though that acts as our. Let's see.
Because Mr. Sunday Movies rarely puts their face on YouTube either, does he? But...
Yeah, no, he doesn't. No, if you watch enough of his stuff, you know what he looks like. But yeah, only through like they occasionally put his picture in the videos, but it's rare. Let's have a look.
Yeah, no, I also don't follow any YouTubers like that, I'm afraid. So I apologise, but I can't answer.
No, I don't either. The 22 then current HoloLive members. So there were 22 members at one point, Chris. I need to find a name of just one of them. Whoever's name I stumble across first, that one will be my favourite.
Okay.
Let me find... Is there a list? There we go. Right. Oh, they're in generations. Oh, here we go. So HoloLive, generation... Well, okay, I'm going to be a cool kid, right? So there's 5 generations of the original HoloLive. I'm going for generation 0, Chris. I'm going right to the original HoloLive because I'm so cool and so with it. I was there in December 2018. No, I'm going to go even further back. Actually, this one was September 2017. Takino Sora. Boom. I'm going to find out what that looks like now.
When you said you're going to get caught out because you were going to research this, were you going to admit that you researched it, or were you going to pretend that you knew and just watch me be like, I don't know what you're talking about?
I was going to pretend for a few minutes and then drop it and admit that I looked into it all. Okay. That was my plan, but I forgot to do that ahead of ahead of the podcast because I was too busy double checking like the Battle Royale trivia, basically, and making sure that I had that all straight, and I completely forgot about this question. Okay, so Takino Sora is my favorite because they were one of the first, and that's, September 2017. I'm an old school fan. That's how into it I am. I was there right at the beginning. Anything after that is just fucking posers, man. It's all about Takino Sora, who I've googled and is a girl in sort of a blue sort of... I don't know what that is. Is that a school outfit? Stewardess outfit? I don't know what that is. It's an outfit. With a red bow.
There you go.
Might not even be a bow, Chris. It could be some red leaves.
I'll be honest. Who was... That was Latty, did you say?
Latty asked that question, yeah.
I'll be honest. If you want to ask another question as well, I'm okay with answering 2 of your questions. Because I feel that didn't generate the discussion you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's really fair. Anyone can ask. You keep asking questions; it doesn't bother me. But yeah, that was Laddie's question. So that's So if you would like to ask a question of us, I guess the point is, we do that once an episode. If you'd like to be the person that asks the question for the next one, hey, head over to the Patreon, ask away. There'll always be a delay because we record these quite ahead of time. We record these like sort of 10 weeks ahead. So if you put a question in and don't hear it done straight away, don't worry. Plenty of time for you to get questions in for a future episode of either this or analysing Avatar. I will try and let people know where their questions are being answered, so that
tease the answer to that question. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Drum up some hype for you reading.
So yeah, I'm just that was. I really wish I prepared better for that.
No, but I think it sounds really cool. I've never. That's an area of YouTube I didn't know existed. But I'd be willing to check out that area of YouTube. I think that sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's become a weird little like phenomenon. Like I am seeing it referenced a lot, and again, grumpy old man just like wants kids to get off my lawn and leave me alone. So I've never actually like clicked on any links and watched any, but I know I kind of tangentially knew what a VTuber was. I must admit, I didn't know what was it, HoloLive, which is a particular brand of it, I guess. I don't know, or a particular company that supplies the visuals for those. I don't know. a founding member of HoloLive. I don't know. So HoloLive is a thing, but yeah, I knew what a VTuber was. I didn't know what HoloLive was. So I was kind of not prepared at all for that question. But if you'd like to ask a question of your own, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. You get episodes a week early, and you get to ask us questions that will show us up for being grumpy old men. If that alone isn't worth the price of admission, I can't help you. Otherwise, you can get us on YouTube, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK. Please like and subscribe and all that jazz on all the different platforms. We're on Spotify, iTunes with this podcast, Nothing But Static, our main TV podcast, Analyzing Avatar. We're all available on all the audio platforms. They all have their own individual services and systems for rating and ranking and subscribing and all that stuff, but please do all of them. You can get us on Twitter. I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham. We do have I don't really give the website link out often because it is just now just the MBS main feed, but nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Or if you'd like to email us some of your thoughts, mail at nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Also, I suppose it's late to promote it now because this is 10 weeks ahead, but I didn't know it existed during the previous episodes. We've started a new sort of series on the YouTube channel. At the moment, only 2 episodes have gone out, called Rambleog, where basically myself and occasionally I think Chris, if I can coax him to do them, we'll be releasing sort of short 10 to 20 minute audio pieces on any subject we want, basically. The first one I've put out was about whether Brooklyn Nine-Nine's cancellation is actually potentially a good thing. I've also got a review of the Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel documentary, and a look at some of Apple Plus's best content and whether it's worth your time within my sort of first couple of episodes. They're going to be going out semi-daily. At the moment, they're going out daily, but whether I'll stick to that or not, I don't know at this point because we're recording this 18th of February. So, but yeah, at the moment, those are going out, and hopefully, when you hear this, they'll still be going out. But that's it. That's everything. Unless you've got anything you want to add and plug, Chris.
No. I think between us answering the that Patreon question so eloquently and early reviews of Joe's Apartment and the Power Rangers movie, we are giving people the content to go for. So I think by the time this comes out, I imagine Patreon's going to be buzzing.
Yeah,
man. Cool. Right. I do again. Whenever we're sarcastic about Patreon, let me be very clear. We love and adore anyone that's giving us anything. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts.
Yes.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.